Hello everyone. Welcome back to our second session. Before starting the session, I have an announcement. I would request you all to please give us your business card so we can give you the presentations, whatever are being presented here. So we will email you tomorrow or day after tomorrow. And so let's start our second masterclass, which is Climate Intelligence for Leaders, Measuring, Managing and Mitigating Risk. 5 years ago, climate was a chapter in a report. Today, it's in the boardroom agenda item. The question is no longer whether climate affects your business, but whether you can act before it becomes a crisis. Three questions leader must answer. What is our actual exposure? Where are our vulnerabilities? And how do we mitigate risk before it becomes our loss? So to address this, please welcome Mr. Aro Dhondial, who is Chief of Staff and the Head of Product at Credible ESG, and Syed Shoaib Roshan, his Senior Solution and Strategy Manager ESG at Credible. Please welcome me in joining them. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I hope I'm audible. Yes. Okay? Okay, perfect. Can I also get a handheld mic for later? Thank you. We'll start our discussion and we'll try to keep it like a discussion. So the topic is climate change and climate risk management. We have been doing this session for last 3 years, but every year we bring some new masala to it. So this year also we've added a lot more facts, a lot more experience that has come from working with different geographies and different clients. Just during the context side, there might be some overlaps with what you have seen before at our presentations. So please bear with us, because for a lot of new people, it will be good knowledge, right? So let's start here. This is our solar system with all of these planets. Which one do we think is the hottest one, or do we know is the hottest one, right? Any answers? Should it be Mercury? Should it be Venus, Earth? Yeah? Any guesses? Venus? Great. Any other guesses? Okay. So, luck or knowledge, you are right. It is Venus. But why, right? Like, it's a little distant from the sun. Mercury could have been the hottest. But this is why. Venus's temperature actually goes up to 462 degrees, which is way beyond Earth. And primarily because of that, right? If you see here, the CO2 is 96.5%. That's how dense the Venus's atmosphere, or the so-called set of gases that surround it, are. And that has led to it being the hottest planet overall, right? So that's Venus. And that also leads us into why CO2 is responsible for this. There's an effect called the greenhouse effect, where a lot of your the sunlight gets trapped inside. It comes in long waves. It goes back in short waves, but it gets trapped. So greenhouse gases overall do this to a planet. In Earth's case, it's still a very small fraction, CO2. But even a marginal increase in that we're seeing over the last 100 years, 150 years has led to a lot of impact. So we'll move on. So what is climate? We'll get back to GHG again. But what is climate? Let's just first set the basics. So today it's warm, it's sunny. So that's still weather, right? This is today's weather. Tomorrow it could be raining. So the climate hasn't changed into a rainy climate. It's still weather. मैंने तो सुनाई दे रहा है. Okay, great. So weather is more of a day-to-day state of the atmosphere, whereas climate is the weather pattern over a range of time. So typically it's 30 years. So if I'm saying today the climate is like this, I'm averaging it out over the last 30 years. So there's an industrial era that was between 1930 and 1970. A lot of industrial activity actually led to what we are seeing the downsides of climate change. And that's accelerating. Overall, that's the path there is, it's accelerating primarily because of these things. So in the 20th century, scientists found out that human activity is actually leading to climate change. Because climate change or global warming is also a natural phenomenon. We don't have to be very afraid of it unless we can control some of this. Because the earth gradually warms, gradually cools. That's the cycle of all planets. During the ice age, 20,000 years ago versus now, we have warmed and then there'll be a cooling. There's a global warming, global cooling. But what we have done is accelerated this a lot because of these activities. And these are all human related, human driven activities, whether it's consumerism that's causing it, whether it's greed, capitalism, call it whatever. But this is the picture right now. And this stat also has changed. So 2023 was the hottest year on record. This is still my old slide. Now the hottest year is 2024. So every year we are just overshooting what has happened over the last year. And these are 175 years ka numbers that are being compared. Right? So 2023 was the hottest last year. And then last year took the crown and became the hottest. And this is from the global reports, right? So we covered a little bit of this. Any guesses why it's called the greenhouse effect? Anyone? This guy knows. Guesses? Well, that's right. It's because of this, right? And to simply imagine it, it's like a greenhouse around the globe, around the earth. So having greenhouses was a natural practice in the colder regions because sunlight was scanty and it was not all year round. So to supercharge kind of growth of those plants, they used to keep greenhouses. Now this effectively is also a boon because life on the planet is also because of this blanket, right? But now it's becoming a bane because there's just too much happening within that blanket. So because of the greenhouse effect, because of all of this global warming, there are so many initiatives that have come up. But why now? Like why in the last 50 years? Why in the last 30 years? There's ICAPS now, a lot of you might be participating in this. There's SDGs that keeps going up and down. Paris Agreement, Trump pulls out of it, but pretty much the world is aligned, right? When we are talking to a lot of US customers, they would say Trump is going to go at some point. Either the regime will change or he will just go, right? So everyone's kind of waiting for that, for the regime change. Everyone's waiting for that. And then there's Kyoto Protocol, the COPs keep happening. But why now, right? Climate change is natural, global warming happens. So the reason basically is we have accelerated this a lot, right? Any guesses on what is the Earth's global temperature on an average right now, like in the last year? Random numbers. You can base it off of Mumbai, you can base it 30. 33. Any other guesses? 24. We're getting closer.
27.
Okay. It's actually 15 degrees. The global average temperature of the earth right now is 15 degrees. What was it during the ice age? Any guesses? Ice age is 20,000 years ago. We've seen all of those ice age movies. What was it back then? Minus 40, okay. Any guesses? 10. Minus 10, okay. Minus 5. It was 8 degrees. It was 8 degrees. So from 8, 20,000 years ago, we are at 15. So it's kind of doubled. What was it in 1950 and 1970, that period? Okay, you're saying climate change is that bad, it shot the planet 5 degrees. It was 14 degrees, right? So what we're getting to is this whole warming of the earth was a natural cycle from 20,000 years ago till very recently it was going at a natural pace. But what we have done is what happened over the last 5,000 years, we've achieved that in 40 years, after 1970 to now. And that's led to a 1 degree rise. So if we see 8 and 15 are not very far. So it's rising very gradually. But 14 and 15 over just 30, 40 years is very, very fast when you compare it to those tens of thousands of years. And that's why there's more chatter about it. There used to be more chatter, but now we are looking at more action about it. So what's climate risk? Simply defining it as a financial and operational disruption that can result in some kind of losses for your business, for our planet, for human life. In the end, the earth doesn't really care about climate, right? It's humans who care about climate. Do we all agree? Like, it has been just fine for billions of years. The planet doesn't care. We sometimes show up and say we will save the planet, but the planet's been saving us for millennia. So climate risk is getting acknowledged because it directly impacts humans. That's the bottom line. It impacts profits, it impacts your operations, it impacts our jobs, it impacts our lungs. All of that, we see worsening. And that's why there's a whole wave across managing, measuring, reporting, mitigating some of this risk. Primarily because of these things, there's hazard intensity that has accelerated. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen so many weather events in India and outside. Like who would have imagined Dubai will have flood and their airport will get disrupted for so long. We keep getting more frequent floods. If you see the weather pattern, it's kind of shifting. So the areas that used to get rain are dry now, and the monsoon is shifting more westward, where Rajasthan is getting floods, right? And Meghalaya is recording low and low rains every year. Then we are also, because of all of this, we are also seeing some of these levers coming from the regulators directly. So there's a regulatory push. There's capital markets will always think about where this risk will add up in the next decade or the next century. If some of us have heard of what's unburnable carbon, right? That's a key concept, how transition risks started to be acknowledged and then quantified. So there was this research done and there were all of this financial modeling where someone said, okay, we're sitting on so much of oil and gas, but because climate change is real, we won't be actually able to burn all of that oil, because 90% of the oil has to stay below the ground if you want to control this. And that is bad for financial markets. That's bad for capital markets. Every risk also has an opportunity side. So maybe having more of this renewable energy in your assets will kind of help. But capital markets are very smart, right? They're ahead of the curve. They want to hedge these risks. We covered some of this. We'll directly get here. And because capital markets have heavily deployed in India, they cannot afford this, right? They cannot afford that more than 36% of our forest cover is prone to forest fires, what's happening in LA. So I'll get to some of the nitty-gritties of physical and transition risks. Now, climate risk, these are just two classifications of how you can look at this risk. One is physical, it's directly these events that are impacting my operations. So there's flooding, drought, sea level rise, extreme weather events as we see. And then there are some transition risks. Now, the differentiation or the segregation between the two is physical risks can be directly perceived. You can see a flood will hit me and that's why I should care about physical risk. Transition risk is what's happening in the policy space. Because of all of these risks, because of the global warming, because of climate change, naturally we are transitioning to a greener economy. We are transitioning to a low carbon economy. We are transitioning to a sustainable economy because we have to. And because of that transition, what kind of risk will arise? If I'm selling oil today and the government comes back and says, starting tomorrow, like Notebandi, they'll, let's say, announce that no oil can be burnt. So that's a risk to my business, and that falls under the transition risk bucket. And there can be policy-oriented risks, there can be liability risks, there can be technological shifts. What if we find a way to burn hydrogen more effectively, and then we don't need fossil fuels, so they can be technology oriented as well, right? So physical and transition risks. In physical, we have some risks that are more acute, which I can feel in the now, right? So, sorry, some of the storms are more predictable now. They're not gradually brewing, but things like sea level rise, it's gradual. It's happening over the next 50, 70 years, it will start affecting us. So those are chronic, those are problems, but more sustained and long term. Similarly, transition risk, we bucketed those into those 4 categories. And this kind of applies to your individual assets, your companies. If you are in the BFSI space or the financial space, then it's also your portfolios where you've deployed this capital. So I'll skip this. So this is kind of an articulation of that, right? There are some acute risks, heat waves in Delhi, floods, forest fires, hurricanes. All of these are more acute. They will impact your business in that very year when that event happens. Chronic is it's progressively building, and this is where a lot of pain lies, because it will one day hit you, and if you've lost this traction right now, and if you've missed that bandwagon, then it can just be an industry changing thing, right, altogether. It can just disrupt your company and everything. So these are some of the acute and chronic. When we talk about regulations, it could be about obsolescence and what's called stranded assets. So in that case, when I was talking about unburnable carbon, that becomes a stranded asset. What if I am Aramco and pretty much I own 60-70% of the oil movement? Then all of that can't go stranded. So there's a huge push in the reverse also, what Trump and these guys are doing. They're also thinking about the stranded assets piece and trying to delay this until their regime stays. But the important thing here, and this is also good for leaders to convince their leaders on why care about physical risk, transition risk, right? So we can call it climate risk, but anyone who knows enterprise risk management or financial risk will actually see them from those lenses. Because all of this manifests into your standard set of risks, credit risk, market risk. Are you able to get capital? Are you able to deploy that capital? Are you able to function as an organization? Is there an operational risk? Or your buyers just stop working with you because you are oil, right? So we have to kind of stitch this narrative together for anyone to really understand why this matters. Because I can say, earthquake, heat wave, flood, forest, इसमें हमारा क्या है? That is what it is, right? It will lead to credit risk, it will lead to liquidity issues, it will lead to operational risk. And this has happened. It's not like it's just theoretical. We are seeing insurers losing money, insurers paying way more than expected because someone lost money. In the real estate sector, we see that. And these are billions of dollars, right? There was a Panama Canal drought that led to transit cuts through the Panama Canal, and anyone who's exporting would bear the brunt of that, right? They will see a price increase or their shipments not going, higher freight cost, and what led to it is just the water went down, you can't float vessels in it, that's it. So it looks like a small problem, but it can cause billions of dollars of impact. Wildfires we know, hurricanes we know, but some things like droughts can have a systemic impact like that. Like it blocked pretty much a lot of trade from India as well. Similarly, around transition risk, since every risk has an opportunity side, people are raising money for greener opportunities, for greener power sector, right? So more than 100 billion was raised in the last 1 year just on the green energy front. Then the whole capital repricing is happening because of the energy transition. And if some of us know Ørsted, the offshore wind company, they have done a lot of projections that the economy will reset, and they feel they will also be affected by that because some of their assets are very large, and if a transition starts affecting them as well, it's a wind company, even then, right? They're projecting some of those things. This is very contextual to India. the Tamil Nadu cyclone, 20,000 crore restoration funds were sought. And a lot of these cyclones are now not unpredictable, right? They have been showing up. We have not been mitigating, adapting. If we see a lot of geographies in the US, Europe, they have a lot of capital to deploy towards adaptation or mitigation of those events. We're still here, right? Where in the end, someone has to demand funds that gets deployed over the next 5 years. In the 5 years, another cyclone hits. So not just corporate action, but all the way from the top, it has to come, right? In 2024, because of heat, the power demand peaked at 250 gigawatt. It was unprecedented. And that creates a whole systemic stress, even at an industrial level. Like, how do you procure energy at the right cost? And it directly impacts everyone's business, not just households. And some of the transition themes happening there are, we were talking about CBAM earlier. So EU has this emissions trading scheme. CBAM is very important to follow even because of that, because they're intrinsically linked now. And we can talk about these a little later. So in business terms, it's your operations getting affected. It's your supply chains getting affected or disrupted. And then it's your asset valuations. The value of your building itself can deteriorate if you are close to the sea in Bombay, for example. And then workforce, sometimes this is not accounted for, but things like heat stress, air quality, these are some of the kind of unquantifiable, intangible kind of issues, right? Where you are still demanding your workforce to be at office, and it's soon approaching temperatures where humans just won't be able to survive outside. And what kind of infra does Bombay have? What kind of infra does Delhi have to aid these people in getting to work in an AC? There's pretty much nothing, right? Like AC local trains are also so scanty. They're inaccessible. A large part of the world doesn't stop. We say Bombay doesn't stop. And that comes at a cost of this, right? Heat stress directly killing people, but also reducing their productivity. So what TCFD recommends, and there's the task force for financial climate-related financial disclosures. So they recommend you imbibe this process, and now this process has also turned into ISSB, then it's turned into IFRS S2. And these pillars are important. We'll talk about this. How do you set up governance around climate issues? Are there named people in your board, in your organization, who will address the topic of climate change and somewhat try to manage or mitigate climate risk? Then what's your strategy towards those potential impacts and opportunities and risks? Then how do you actually handle and manage those? And then everything has to eventually be data driven as well. So how do you publish what metrics you're using, what targets you've set? And this sort of is becoming a fiduciary responsibility. It's not just reporting for the sake of reporting. It's not greenwashing, green hushing, all of those examples Mr. Panigrahi was sharing earlier. It is very objective in the sense it's an objective way to tell someone, if you put 100 rupees on me, it can become 60 tomorrow because of climate, right? So that's what investors are also looking for. Now, we will talk about, I'll invite Roshan in a bit to talk about how climate risk analysis can be done or is supposed to be done. But one thing that everyone misses out on when they start assessing their climate risk is taking a comprehensive view of their value chain. So if I ask someone, how did you do your physical risk assessment? They would say, I'm a hotel business, I own 50 properties. I just did climate risk assessment for those 50 properties. But what about your linen supplier? What about the places you're procuring water from? What about the places you're procuring food from? What about the poultry businesses that you're working with? See, when you are doing a climate risk assessment, it's very important to map your upstream, midstream, and downstream activities. And within those activities, you'll see a lot of stakeholders and relationships there, right? If a upstream material supply chain gets disrupted, then my sites and processes also struggle, and that's why my distribution and retail also struggles. The same can work in reverse. If there's wildfires in the US, do you think people will be putting out those fires or buying more bed sheets, right? So it can work both ways, but when you are assessing climate risk impacts, you have to consider the entire value chain. And what this helps you is then pinpoint exact hotspots, whether it's locations, suppliers, trade routes, products. It reveals who are the critical stakeholders that get affected. And just going back to this slide, right? How will you build this? How will you build your strategy? It can't come out of thin air. It can't come out of just your business model. It has to come out of your value chain. It has to come from assessing different activities that you do, then pinpointing what are the hotspots, then pinpointing what are the stakeholders, what are those relationships, how much money is assigned to those stakeholders, and then you start analyzing your physical and transition risk. So that's a precursor to jumping headfirst into, I'll run a lot of scenarios, I'll run all of that data pipeline. So here I'll invite Roshan to take us through how it's done, and then I'll come back to summarize. And then there's a demo of the AI platform that we have for this.
Yeah, so I think once I take you through the major chunk of how you do climate risk analysis, we'll show you what we have built on the background through Credible, through our platform, right? So before I start explaining all of this, I think over the last 6-7 months, I've been just playing around with geospatial data and climate data. One of my favorite professors called Ben Newell, who works in climate risk, says that the way CSOs pitch climate risk is extremely important in this time and age, wherein, for example, if an asset in Delhi has 1 in 100 probability of having a drought, it just does not, 1 in 100 year probability of having a drought, it just does not mean 1 in 100 years, but it also means 26% in 30 years, right? So the way you bring in conversations to boardroom is by setting proper narratives, and that you understand only when you do deep climate risk analysis, right? So roughly, I think I'll skip, right? So I think you must have heard this from everywhere around if you have had a conversation about climate risk assessment. You first figure out where your assets are, you identify your assets and identify core risk metrics from your value chain itself. What we call is we do a value chain analysis. We then talk about climate risks and opportunities. From there also, from every value chain element has a risk and opportunity attached to it, right? So for example, a downstream textile seller might just not have a climate risk and a climate risk of having late deliveries because of high heat stress, right? Because the clothes are perishable, it can go down in the value chain super fast. So identifying risk metrics and strategizing around it before getting into core climate risk assessment is extremely important. So that is the first step. From there, you also understand how your assets work across your business, right? How many locations, how many factories do you have set up, how many offices do you have set up, which has the most amount of economic transactions happening around the floor, right? Like mostly for manufacturing companies, it will be their core plants having most of their money moving around. So that is what we talk about identification. In assessment, I would touch base on what we do at Credible and what is regularly mandated by climate practitioners across, but it is just to understand, for physical risk, it's just to understand weather metrics across your assets, right? Like how many number of days has been above and beyond a set temperature, probably 35 degrees. That's one heat stress variable. Similarly, flooding, right? How many times in a year or how many amount of times in a year that particular location has been flooded can be a flood risk metric. So figuring out what metrics matter to you is also extremely important, and that is where we help, right? And then you integrate that and you sort of link it to your finances. So you check, okay, for every single heat risk, flood risk, and other metrics, number of assets that get exposed to such metrics, the probability of those assets getting affected, and then a potential financial impact, right? Like, and then you put it together in frameworks like IFRS and TCFD to help stakeholders understand what your asset register and your risk register looks like. And then you take it to a boardroom where you say, okay, one of our facilities, it looks like the wildfires, which is happening often, might catch up one day, and our production might slump a little bit. Let's diversify our rice production assets, right? That's something that LT Foods is actively doing with a company called Miti Labs. Thought I'll quote that. So that came from in-depth climate risk assessment, right? Like, and all of this can only come if you run your assets through run your assets through climate risk assessments, right? So what we as Credible offer as part of climate risk assessment is we help you understand at a sector level what are the risks that is affecting you, right? As simple as that heat map that you see there, probably your company XX across a sector, what does its transition risk, what does its physical risk for each metric look like? Similarly, for organizations, we get deeper into asset-specific heat maps, asset-specific risk frameworks, and then we understand gaps also, right? Like some asset, we clearly there is not a lot of water data available, so we scale up and we start figuring out from other sources how we can extrapolate risk metrics for them. And at the end, an organization, like I previously said, would look at an asset prioritization, right? Like out of your 10 assets, which is the most vulnerable asset out of the lot, which is the most highest affected and also very integral to your operations, right? So all of that is something that is what RO and the team have been clearly working on for a lot of time. So if we get down to just doing physical risk assessments, you need to understand what metrics you're actually picking, right, across different hazard and risk drivers. And then you see which models with either your consulting providers or your tool providers, how much of these proprietary models have coverage, right? At Credible, we use both CIMP6 and NASA's geospatial model to get you accuracy up to 20 of latitude and longitude differential, which is literally like measuring climate risk for two different streets in itself. So that is one thing that you look at. The second thing you look at is you start projecting these assets and these risk metrics to different scenarios to look at how, okay, in an ideal scenario, what would the climate risk in the next 50, 30, or even 10 years or 100 years look like? And then in a worst case scenario, what would it look like? I'll touch base on what scenarios we use and how does different NGFS based scenarios also help us in our platform. But just that's roughly what you do, right? And then at the end, you accumulate it into a crisp, concise, simple to understand table, and then you report it back to your stakeholders, specifically your board and investors, because climate risk is and will be credit risk going forward. It is imperative for businesses to understand that very well in advance, because if you miss out on not planning for an adversity, it is going to hit your numbers one day or the other, either through business impact or just through damaged assets, right? So that's with physical risk. And then in transition risk, we talk about how carbon intensities look around different sectors. Again, what are your different types of asset classes, right? A company might just not have factories and operations running. They might have different assets deployed everywhere. And then based on these assets present in different geographies, we also look at their carbon pricing, and then you override scenario analysis over all of this, right? So essentially, you pick an asset, you pick the list of metrics you want to plot your risk assessments against, and then you test it with scenarios, and then you come to a conclusion. Okay, from our sound understanding of these risks, we believe that at this scenario, this is an imperative risk to our business, and then you report it back, right? So, and I wanted to touch base more on scenarios because that is extremely important, because that is when a meaning is given to a risk metric, right? Like each of the risk metric can be just taken as a scientific definition or just a number that says, okay, these many number of days, these many floods have happened in this one particular location in the world. But when you plot probability graphs across different scenarios. Like NGFS gives you four different scenarios, which is orderly transition, disorderly transition, too little, too late, and hothouse world. Like the name suggests, I would not go too deep. Orderly transition is what regulations have set in place, right? Like we will follow that 1.0 Paris climate agreement. The emissions trajectories will be as defined as what has been done in IPCC graphs or what IPCC scientists have been telling. Disorderly transition is just the opposite of that, wherein it is not going till there in 2030. Too little, too late is a scenario where you just assume that you have just entered a scenario where a lot of climate risk hazards have peaked for your geographical location. And hothouse world is essentially a scenario where you see that, okay, temperatures are it's like your nationally determined temperature contributions are super high, or they've bypassed all pledged targets, right? So these are the four scenarios that you can plot every single risk metric towards. So yeah, so when you see, yeah.
Just a note there, and that's a good discussion point also, that all of these scenarios are still hypothetical, right? It's not defining that this will happen, but why you should do scenario analysis is you have two voices in your head, right? If world goes well, I'm safe. If world doesn't go well, am I safe? And then this is splitting that further. They're saying there are just not two scenarios, there are about six, seven of these, and you can then choose where do I feel my business and my geography, my regional context is heading. So you can pick 2 or 3 scenarios. You don't have to start reporting on all of this and get into that chaos. You pick 2 or 3 scenarios. Ideally, don't pick anything that's very radical. Pick towards what's above and below mean. So in this, I would pick one which says disorderly and one from the orderly ones. Or I would do something like this, right? But picking something like a hothouse world and a very extreme cold world also doesn't make sense, because either of those things might not be true. But what's more likely? So what you are doing with scenario analysis is still hypothetical assessment, but you are making a case, given this happens, I'm ready or I'm not ready. And given that happens, I'm absolutely ready, something like that. So that is something that will lead to quantification. We'll get to risk quantification and some of the value at risk analysis. Having said that, all of this is still going to be hypothetical. And none of this undermines the value it holds for investors, because they are seeing this across different companies in the world. Ideally, it's good recommendation if you have peers who have already been reporting on TCFD or IFRS. Let's say you're in the telco sector, you're in the manufacturing sector, find your peers whom you think are reporting well on this and whom you think the investors and the markets are looking for these metrics. You just follow what scenarios they're picking up, right? So because they've already validated this, they have done scenario analysis, their investors are happy with that report if they've done it for 2 years. So that's a simple hack. If you want to start defining scenarios, picking scenarios for your organizations, always look at sector peers, sector leaders across the globe.
Yeah, just to end that thought, I think most of the Indian companies, if you open their TCFDs, they will pick only those 2 orderly NGFS scenarios, which is net zero 2050 or below 2 degree temperature differential below 2 degree. Those are the 2 things you'll usually see companies doing scenario analysis over. So yes, so when you see projecting those physical risk metrics over different scenarios under each of those quadrants, like we spoke about net zero 2050, below 2 degrees, delayed transition, all of that, you end up getting a very simple and easy to understand heat map that looks like this, right? So for each of the scenario, what does the end of century warming, temperature warming look like? That is just one example metric I have to here for this heat map. So you see that in orderly scenario, the temperature is very low, right? It's at 1.4 degree temperature change, which will roughly be 16.4 degrees if you had followed RO's 15 degree thought process earlier. But if you take too little, too late scenario, it should be somewhere around, the average temperature of the world should be somewhere around 17.3 degrees Celsius. So how would this, so this is how you plot scenarios, right? Before you integrate your risk metrics. Same way for transition in each of these different quadrants, in each of these different 6 different scenarios that you see here, you would see, okay, what is it an immediate risk for if there is a policy change in orderly scenarios? If it's a delayed risk, is it a slow change? Is it a larger variation, medium variation because of such scenarios being played around, right? So this is how you integrate risk metrics and literally plot probability graphs on what your asset or your physical or your transition risk metric would look like in X amount of years, right? And then after that, you project this, you check it with business parameters, you overlay it with financials, which RO will also touch base later on, and then aggregate it across your sites and see what's happening at a business or at an organizational front, right? So, yeah, so roughly if I have to summarize how you come from, okay, core risk analysis that you do towards through probabilistic models and get to an answer as to how much dollars would get impacted through the business, there's just 7 steps, right? You identify your assets, then you pick your hazards and your metrics, then you do all your financial vulnerability and understand how much of business can be impacted through these hazards under these assets. Then you do stress testing, which we spoke about scenarios earlier. Then once you do all of these 4 steps together, you will come to a conclusion as to how a potential impact of this risk would look like. Where would it hit the business? How much of the business would be impacted? And then you combine that with your business financials, you will understand how many actual dollars of asset or how many actual dollars of operation is at risk. And the 7th step is something that's very common. Why do we do all of this? It's because there are regulations or there are investors who want to see it put in some regulations. So the 7th step is where we recommend you to, I think it's off. It was not working in between. It was working? Okay. So at the end you put it together in a good report which can be previously TCFD but now IFRS S2 in particular, right? So I think these are a couple of platform screenshots where you see how we do scenario analysis. RO will get to that detailed demo in a bit. But I think, I think just the last bit that I want to leave the room with and also pass the podium to RO is once we do all of these quantification of climate risk across different assets, it is also essential that you track this back to your board ESG charter or your climate governance charter, where you explicitly state that, okay, we have understood and finalized and underlined these many risks, but these risks are categorized probably into risk, credit risks, or asset level risk. You will put that into your existing ERM framework and then have board oversight, have audits over it. This is a very, very, very ideal scenario. I'm sure this might be too far-fetched, but this is where you need to tie it down to, right? And that is why frameworks like IFRS and TCFD break their systemic reporting into 4 sections. Governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. In risk management and metrics and targets, you would do what I spoke about a little earlier, but it's always essential to track those results back into governance so that you have a cohesive system in place which understands where the board and investors ultimately understand how much of vulnerability your business has with climate risks. So,
Yeah, I think a couple
You
of
can
case studies we have.
Yeah.
We can just skim through those and just go back once.
wanted to,
Yeah.
financial overlay is one thing
Yeah.
you had to speak about.
Let's go a couple
One
slides
second,
back.
I'm going back.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, here.
Yeah, so some of these, and we'll send this slide, it's quite noisy overall, but packs a lot of content. So you can see some of these direct financial risks. We've been speaking about these: operational cost, asset impairments. There could be regulatory penalties. And then there could be some sector-specific challenges as well, right? We were looking at the value chain of aluminium. We were looking at metal sector. Similarly, energy sector has a lot of transition risk drivers. It also has a lot of physical risk drivers because of the upcoming AI demand, right? That's one new up and coming thing, where even in India, a lot of Data center businesses are now sprouting. How will we meet energy demand of a billion users of AI? So all of those sector specific challenges will also show up. So it's very important to have your sectoral context, your operational context, and then your value chain context. And then some of these risks, a lot of people track in ERM, but not from a climate lens, right? Like, can there be a reputational damage? So if you are more downstream, if you are directly interfacing with brands, or if you are working with customers who are in the consumer sector, then reputational damage can mean a lot. These are like climate risks or disruptions in your supply chain, your partners not doing well on their climate strategy, your energy sources not being very transparent, right? So all of those can also play. We can move on. Couple of case studies of some good artifacts, some good reports we've seen over the last years, and some insights from there. This will also give a sense of how this is presented in an investor narrative, right? So it's both about opportunities and risks. We over-index on risk, but there are also a lot of opportunities that come out of the climate equation. So if you are doing anything good, it's also a chance to amplify that and let it be known, versus a more narrative disclosure, which is always seen as, you know, the company will be talking heaps and bounds about what they're doing well, but actually hiding what are the actual risks. So this framework is fairly balanced. It talks about both identified risks and opportunities. That's a retail company, Decathlon, French company present in all geographies. They've been doing very good TCFD reports, and now the ISSB disclosures as well. And they're also covering the entire value chain, right? Right from design. So there are pretty much no physical risk affecting their designs. But then there's their value chain, upstream, midstream, logistics, both upstream and downstream. This is downstream and this is downstream. So everywhere they've identified what are the top 9, 10 risks, physical transition, some opportunities. So eco-design they've listed as one of these opportunities. So when we look at PCF, and if we are actually planning to make our PCF better by some eco-design activities, that's an opportunity which your investors would love to know about, that you're ahead of the curve. Increased ROI from RE adoption, efficiency increase in tech. You can go on. Yeah, and then kind of heat mapping those risks and opportunities, right? How severe and how frequent is this? So impact and probability. Those are two very good lenses to even come to the financial impact of climate risk. All you need is, has this happened before? Will it happen again? How bad will it be? And what's the likelihood of it happening again, right? In simplistic terms, that's what all risks are, right? I put some money. Is there a chance that it will get lost? How soon will that happen? And how big will that impact be? Will all of it get lost? Will some of it get lost? So you rate these in two scales. Next. And this is then, we'll show you on the platform also how you can track different locations across the globe and do this in a more continuous manner. What Decathlon has done very interestingly is not just capture their own assets, but 14 suppliers that they rate as high risk suppliers, and all are based here, right? So these are some of their high risk suppliers. Next. And then they're also looking at different stores across the globe, and all of these red dots are their high exposure stores. So thinking both upstream and downstream, right? Will my distribution get hurt? Will my supply get hurt? And we'll show how Credible can get you to exactly this output or something better right off the bat. You don't have to do pretty much anything. Just dump your list of assets onto the system.
Yeah, and one thing just to double click here is, if you notice, Decathlon has also picked their own variables, right? Like one risk map was purely about water, which was essential to them, and then it was about temperature, hot days, right? So when you look at your assets, you should also look at what risks are potentially impacting your business as well, just to reiterate.
Yeah. And then this is interesting for transition risk. They are taking carbon taxes as that metric across the globe. And then they're mapping how many sites do they have exposure to in all of these different regions. and where ICAP goals have been enforced, where the World Bank has different policies determined, where governmental schemes are there, right? So this can be again risk and opportunity, where some governments could be doing the reverse of not penalizing but maybe rewarding someone who's doing better. So those trends are also interesting from their report. Next.
Yeah, I think these are going to be very straightforward experts from TCFD reports that I've been reading over the week to prepare this deck. So I picked different companies across the sector in India, right? One is Lupin Pharma. Before we go deeper into it, I think we picked 4 companies. One is Prism Johnson, which is a cement company, and then we picked ANZ Bank. We looked at their TCFD or their climate disclosures, literally relayed it out as to what their risks and opportunity, their under physical transition and what their description looks like, right? In physical risk, if you notice, every company is doing basic variables, right? Like heat stress, flooding, cyclone, water stress, and just weather is where they stop the buck at, and that is what we at Credible will also recommend to you. In transition risk, they pick up all the variables, including additional variables like, for example, Lupin Pharma took green innovation as one of their transition risks because they feel that the low GWP inhaler propellant deployment has come as a customer need, and hence this became one of their one of their opportunities, right? So supply chain decarbonization is another opportunity, right? We provide a lot of supply chain assessment to our customers, but if you flip that on the other side, not looking at the risk lens, but to identify how I move towards greener supply is something that Lupin is doing through its TCFD, right? So
and this also shows a lot of us are doing this, but not milking it enough.
Yeah.
Right. So some of these reports are also great artifacts to show what work the org is actually doing, because this looks more, as I said, decision ready and objective, versus where you're writing essays about how good the org is. These are more direct risks and opportunities. You just frame those things as a risk or an opportunity, the whole narrative immediately starts making sense from a financial lens as well, right?
Right. So I think we can
Yeah,
pass
we
this
can
deck
pass
on, right?
this
It's a
deck.
little noisy, but I
Yeah.
think it's a good read for someone who's looking at this. This is exactly taken from ANZ Bank, and HSBC Malaysia has been taken from their IFRS sample reports that they have published out in the public. The 2 Indian companies, it's their old TCFD reports. So please do. This is just a summary for you guys to understand how well you can write your report as well. I'll leave this to Aro. I'll sit at the back and navigate the platform. Is that
Yes,
yeah?
yes.
Yeah.
We'll take like 5 minutes and cover some of the platform.
Yeah, I'll connect
They'll
from
be
there.
able to help.
Yeah.
They'll be able to help.
Yeah. Before that, Q&A.
We can do a quick Q&A, while you set up. Any questions on this so far? How many of us are planning to start with some sort of climate risk assessment, or have started already? I know I was talking to Mr. Sunil here. They have already started, but any organizations already doing it, and others who are probably planning to start this year, next year? Okay, awesome. That's great. That's great. That's one out of many. And I would say how we should think about the whole climate risk piece is not get bogged down by the complexity of where will the data come from. It is not as difficult. Actually, cracking the scope 3 problem from a data intensive lens, climate risk assessments are far easier to do from a data perspective. They're hard to do from a analysis, planning, strategizing, acting on those data perspective. But that's not the ask, right? What gets measured gets managed. That's the big hypothesis everyone works around. So the first step is measuring it, right? And measuring it can be made very, very simple. Roshan, you're good there? Okay. Okay. Meanwhile, any questions from the audience on what we saw today? Okay. Anything? You can map it in the platform. Only You can also run the platform parallelly to test how good was the previous one. So you can do both. And it all the way supports the report creation as well, right? So if you're doing a TCFD report, you can actually take all of that data into the report. So I'd love to maybe schedule a deeper dive later. Today we'll just cover the surface of broadly what's happening. And for everyone's benefit, two geographies that are doing very well on climate risk. Europe has done historically very, very well. They've flatlined because of all of this CSRD chaos that's going on. But interestingly, Australia and New Zealand are doing a lot of groundbreaking work on just approaches towards climate modeling, scenario analysis. And the reason is they're tied to the food and agriculture value chain, right? So we work with Fonterra there, which is one of the biggest milk providers to the world, pretty much the biggest. And they have an immense pressure on climate risks, both physical and transition risks, all the way that the global models we'll see, everyone will tell you, okay, we've done a physical risk analysis of our assets, and the resolution, meaning on the grid, we're mapping a 20-kilometer radius for each asset. So one asset within the 20, if there are 5 assets within the 20-kilometer radius, they'll rate the same in terms of climate risk. New Zealand has gone and deployed their models to downscale it to 5 kilometers. So you can differentiate street-wide, right? If there's a property in Colaba and then 5 kilometers from Colaba, they can have very different risks because one is closer to the sea, other is not. So good geographies for kind of you guys to follow. Australia, New Zealand, a lot of groundbreaking work happening there. A lot of enforcement also. They both have climate reporting regimes that are historically well set and also growing very well. You good? Okay. So we'll look at the platform real quick. Some of us have seen the credible ESG data management platform. This is the climate reporting and the climate risk assessment platform. So on the left, we see a lot of these steps. There's a data hub, there's a value chain analysis capability, there's all the way to financial impact. And then we're helping with some kind of report, right? It could be a TCFD report, it could be a IFRS S2. This example has the Australian AASB S2 report. It's exactly IFRS S2 minus 6 disclosures that they felt weren't Australia specific. So your data hub is your dump of all of these different site locations. We also support emissions tracking here. This is like a lighter weight emissions. Roshan, if we could go to data requests. Yeah, so it's all your emissions data, but also then data that we need for value chain analysis, right? Like purchase goods and services is something that also helps us understand your value chain that's upstream. It's not just going into carbon accounting, it's actually helping us understand where you're buying from, who are these vendors, where's the big concentration of finance. And then we also cover some of this asset specific data for physical risk analysis. So all you have to do is dump a file here with all your assets. There could be hundreds or thousands of assets across your value chain. That I'll get to in a little bit. We see some of these topics here, risks and opportunities, physical risk. But as I said, the precursor to risk analysis is a in-depth value chain analysis. So if we just click on that. So now we are looking at the value chain analysis for this industry, health and human services. This is just an example that we picked. Now what's happening here is the platform is using generative AI. We've also trained the models on many risk registers, many value chains. So given an industry division and sector and a region, it will be able to identify what are the different activities across upstream, own operations and downstream. So in here, we might need to zoom out a little bit, so that we can see a little more. Right, so upstream you're doing some employee management and training, there's operational management, okay. Own operations for this healthcare company, there's billing, there's community engagement. If you just open one of these activities, click on view. So you see what are the resources and stakeholders that are part of that activity. Now, where will your risk come from? They will come from these resources and stakeholders. It's not going to come from just activities. I can say my business upstream will get affected, specifically a given activity. But what are the exact resources? What are the stakeholders who get affected, right? Whom do I have to care about in this activity? So that we do across upstream, midstream, downstream. And as I said, we're also using your purchase and sales information to give more context to this. So there's a, yeah, so you can then, the platform did a AI-based first cut. It created a baseline for you. Now you can put your purchase information here, and that starts enriching this data. So if I just select a purchase ledger, let's try this. Roshan? Yeah. So what it will do is it will overlay all of the financial data that comes from the purchase ledger. So there are other views. There's a list view above. And then, so some of these operations and some of these activities, if they are part of your purchase ledger or part of your midstream, downstream sales records, will be able to overlay that. So from a risk lens, you might want to care about activities that have a bigger financial overlay than the ones that have lesser, right, or fewer. Let's click on that financial overlay. Okay, so for this month or for this year, none of my upstream data has come in, but I know from my own operations which are some of the bigger activities, bigger sites. Similarly, I can do downstream as well. Now, once I'm done with this, it's important for me to frame my climate-related risks and opportunity statements. So we'll move to risks and opportunities. So what you're doing here, simply the platform is getting you to a good baseline. You're enriching it with more context-specific data of your organization. You are playing the reviewer here. So you can take this data to a board workshop and say, which topics do you want to rate higher? So the platform, based on your value chain, generates a lot of these risk statements. So if we just click on maybe the flooding, yeah, anything works. So it's creating all of these statements for you that for my particular activity across this sector, this is one risk vector that comes from rainfall, and it's going all the way to saying that climate change driven disease vectors can expand, right? So because of rainfall, the whole mosquito situation can worsen, and then my public health systems can go crazy. So that's because you are in a health and human services context right now, because we're looking at rainfall as a hazard driver, and then we are looking at a specific risk coming from that driver. So similarly, now we're letting you explore all of the different climate metrics. Let's go back. Across rainfall, drought, storm and wind. And these are still at a statement level. So your job here is to pick what are my priority risks. So there's a prioritized bucket above, way above, there's a prioritized. So now you're saying, okay, this thing sounds good, this is a genuine thing, this risk statement applies to my organization, and you can add more as well. Now, once you've identified your risks and opportunities, what's important to do scenario analysis on top of is these hazard drivers, right? So I don't need to care about 1,000 metrics in the world. These are the risk statements that resonate with me, so I will only run my physical risk analysis or transition risk analysis for those vectors, those hazard drivers. That brings us to physical risk. Yeah, maybe let's go to the location view first. So all your different locations across the globe, this could be scattered across the globe or concentrated in a specific region. We are able to just keep zooming into one or just click on one location. So looking at different views of your facilities, and now I can say for exactly that asset, what are the different risk profiles, how do you evolve over these different time horizons in 2 scenarios. We've selected those 2 scenarios for you. You can come back to us and say, I'm using a different set of scenarios. Now this can it's looking way simple, but under the hood we are crunching all of that data that came from NASA Earth Exchange. And even at a consulting oriented exercise level, this exercise can take anywhere between 2 months to sometimes half a year to conduct this for hundreds of your assets. And even there's a lot of extrapolation. They'll do it for 25 of your assets, then say we have grouped these assets in a certain way. Because we're using engineering behind it, we're not doing this manually. You can dump 1,000 assets into the platform, and all it'll take is 2 minutes to run all of this analysis, go to asset level. But now you'll ask, what do I do with this data, right? I can't report it. I can maybe say, okay, great, it's increasing or decreasing. So we have a lot of results here that can directly be used as an output. So we saw individual office level metrics. This is what a climate expert can use, but this is not pretty much, I also can't make a lot of sense of this, right? So if we just click on scenario analysis results, the platform is crunching all of that data, and it's creating a very contextual and summarized view that because of drought, how many assets and what percentage of my assets get affected. This display is bad, but all of these are lighting up as green, those are red, these are blue. So it's giving you a heat map with quantification of how bad or how good is a particular risk theme performing over your set of assets. I can have different thresholds for these, and this we can guide you right how to do this. But then it's also creating more views. What are the top hotspots in my locations? What is the intensity and severity? We were talking about what's the likelihood and what's the level of impact. So if we just click on intensity and severity above, so we can look at how many times is this event likely to happen and how bad will it be. All you need for financial modeling on top of this, right? And then you can stress test and go to a single individual variable and say, just because of, go on analytics, yeah. So just for a particular metric, what are the top hotspots? Like Decathlon did, they just isolated water risk. So that's similar here. If you keep going down, you'll see what are the water risk affected geographies. You just pick one from the entire stack. So that's what the platform does from a physical risk standpoint. You can also, like if you are a bank, if you're an asset management use case, you can also just key in a location. Can we stop playing with the, yeah, let's go back to the location explorer. You can just run that analysis in real time as well, right? So if I just put a street address, maybe let's try this hotel, Kohinoor Hotel. Will it come? Kohinoor Continental. No, let's drop that. Yeah, let's try Mumbai, anywhere, right? So it can work with street addresses. As you can see, it's also not just picking Mumbai, but it can pick Mumbai-Pune Expressway also, or a specific lat long. So all of this is being done just based on a street address. All you need to put into the platform, and this was instant, right? It's coming up with the risk profile across all of those horizons. All of this lat long mapping, you don't have to get into that chaos. Just street addresses, what type of asset it is, and we're good to go. I know we are tight on time. Yeah. So just 1 minute I'll take to cover some of the other flows. Roshan, if we could show the transition risk. So this is again picking from NGFS what applies to you, your region, your geography. But doing that in the context of your organization, not just because NGFS is 300,000 rows in that Excel. Physical risk is way larger, it's petabytes of data. So that's humanly impossible to run locally. But this you could still make a case that, okay, I have that NGFS sheet, but picking the right metric, which one of these applies to your industry, sector and company, that's something that the platform does off the bat. And then you can visualize this, of course, right, across different risk verticals, market, technology, policy, reputational. there's financial impact, there's reporting and disclosures, there's, for, okay, there's also a guided experience here, so you can navigate through. So you're also looking at across all of those scenarios for your different financial statements, like your income statement, how will these metrics evolve in different scenarios? Same way I can do this for my balance sheet, for my cash flow statements across different scenarios. And then my final artifact is a report, right? So we can jump to report. So those 4 pillars: governance, strategy, risk management, metrics, and targets. All the metrics, all the risk ledgers, all the risk registers will auto flow directly into disclosure. But we do a little bit more here, where even for governance, we have some writing tools, right? It's at a section level, up top, right? Yeah, yeah. So there's like AI assistants where you can put your board charter here and it will write the whole governance disclosure for you. You're not just asking GPT that write something for me, you are saying, write this disclosure based on my documents. So we've used some of those board charters here. And if we click on that view previous AI drafts, so this is what it drafts for you. It will also cite the sources it picked. So a lot of new age reporting that we're bringing. And this we're trying to bring for BRSR also. It's a bit delayed, but we have it for CSRD now. We have it for IFRS S2. And we are reverse bringing this to the BRSR. I'll stop there. We're at time. Any questions, feel free to ask me a little bit later. I know Deb has an agenda. Next. Okay, so that concludes the session, and next is awards, right? Yeah, then let's do Q&A. I thought you said this. Okay, any questions on this, on what we saw? Would love to individually schedule sessions around how to do this, what the platform gives, what you can bring, all of that we can work with, right? Any questions? Even credible people can ask questions because it's new build, so a lot of our teammates are also not fully aware of some of these new workflows.
Yeah, but I think for this is built for international markets like Aro said, but with Naveen Fluorine, because our team is here, we're going to build, we're going to do climate risk assessments, value chain mapping, all of that that we presented today in a few more months with Naveen Fluorine. Yeah, hopefully.
So it's become both a platform that our customers use directly, but also a platform that helps advisory delivery be fast, right? So that's the new age advisory, where not with India, but with other Deloitte firms globally, we are now deploying this as an internal asset for Deloitte, where they can run individual analyses here, right? So Deloitte Australia is using this entire stack, but Deloitte Belgium and Germany, they're only using the climate risk module right now to fasten their delivery cycles. And we internally also use this in our consulting vertical.
Like advisory teams on literally steroids and working super fast is what this tool gets consultants at, right? You will get faster turnaround times for everything.
Yeah.
So Roshan, you said you will be customizing something.
Yeah.
So will you be also developing some dashboards which we can use directly to the boards?
Yes.
Because they are more interested in.
So whilst Aro was demoing, each of these modules that we spoke about, which we will do also with you, has an export functionality. Okay. All of those visualizations will then also go through a layer of personal customization because it's more on the advisory front, Abhi. So whatever we get from Credible Essentials platform will be downscaled or upscaled basis Naveen Fluorine's requirements.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So next is,
Thank you, Mr. Aro and Mr. Roshan. This was a very insightful session. So the message is clear. Climate intelligence is not nice to have. It's an operating system we must have types.